So the 2-star dungeon Carmine Rage Island is a complete new dungeon, so it's not a remake like some of the other 2-star dungeons. And this one has also some really nice and funny mechanics. So let's see what it has to offer. Now the 2-star dungeons have one major difference, and that's that the end bosses not only have fury attacks, so the pink circle attacks, but now also wrath attacks, which are signaled by the pink diamond. They work exactly the same, it's just important that you can block fury attacks with a stamp block or movement block, but a wrath attack you can only block with a movement block. So that's just something you need to get used to. Okay, so the boss has two major mechanics. So the first one is a little bit more complicated, so I will explain first how everything is working, and then again I will repeat everything and explain what are the best ways to play it, so you exactly know what you have to do. Okay, so the mechanic starts when the boss teleports into the middle of the arena. And now a lot of stuff is happening, but for this it's important how everyone is positioned. Only the distance to the boss is important. So the distance to the middle of the arena. So in our clip here, player 4 is the furthest away, player 1 the second furthest, and so on. Now there are 4 different pillars. On each pillar one person is being pulled. Additionally, they will be also chained on this pillar, and the other 2 players will be free. So the player 1, 4, 2 and 5 will be chained on the pillars. Because in our clip, these 4 players are the furthest away from the boss. Player 5 and 6 will be then free, because these are the closest to the boss. Okay, but now the boss will smash the area around each pillar once. Of course, if you are in the area when the smash hits, then you will of course die. So what you have to do here is that you run into the adjacent area. Then your chain will still be inside of the area, but not your character. That's how you survive, and you also lose the chain by that. Okay, that sounds easy, but there are a few things to consider. First of all, you need to start running before you see that he's doing his attack on you. Like, you can still make it otherwise, but you need to have like a mobility spell or a lot of movement speed. That's why it's also important to understand who will be smashed first. And that's always the player who was the furthest away when you got pulled onto the pillars. So in our case here, player 4. And the second smash is then aimed on the player who was the second furthest away. So in our case here, player 1. And the smashes keep then going in this direction. What also important is that if you lose your chain, you will get stunned for a short duration. So important here that the player runs into the correct adjacent area. So for example, if player 4 would have ran to my position here, he would have been stunned on my position, and then the second smash would have killed him. Okay, so it's always important to run into the correct direction. Okay, but there are even 2 more things in this mechanics you have to understand. First of all, the second player, so the player who's the second furthest away from the boss, will always get a debuff. It's a big red axe which will deal quite a bit of constant damage on you. So in our case, I had this here over my head, and you will see how I get constantly damage here. Okay, and then the last thing you need to know for this mechanic is that he's also throwing a spinning axe which is following someone. So after the 4 players are being pulled to the pillars, he will do another check who is the furthest player from the boss. This player will be targeted by the spinning axe, and this spinning axe will follow the person for quite a bit of time. Okay, these were now a lot of information. Now let me explain how you usually play that. Okay, so at the beginning it's really helpful to decide who will be on which position. So usually you have the position 1 to 6, 1 being the furthest away from the boss and 6 being the closest to the boss. So position 1 should be just always a ranged DPS, so that he can always be the furthest player from the boss. The second player, so the player who gets the red X over his head, will get constantly damage. I think the best way to play this is if the healer takes it, because then he can just constantly heal himself. A lot of people would say the tank should take it because he gets less damage, but since there were a lot of changes to this boss, I don't think it's really good anymore. Because you don't have a lot of time to position yourself, and the tank usually stands close to the boss. So it's really hard for him to get to position 2. And except player 2, no one needs here any heal in the mechanic. Okay, a ranged DPS on position 1 and the heal on position 2. The rest of the position really doesn't matter. Okay, what is really helpful here now is that you mark the players who go on position 1 and 2. So you always know who gets smashed first, who gets smashed second, and based on that you can then see who gets smashed third and fourth. So at the beginning I would always suggest you doing those marks. Okay, but after then everyone is being pulled, he will again check who is the furthest player. So usually how you play that is that a person who is free So either the person who's on position 5 or on position 6 is, after everyone is being pulled, runs directly to the outside of the arena so that he will be the furthest player from the boss. Then he is throwing the axe to him and it will follow him, but since he is free he can just easily kite the axe. Because otherwise the axe would go to someone who is bound on the pillar, which would of course be really annoying. But the person who kites the axe also needs to be careful that he's not being smashed. That's why it's also important that there are these marks, that he always understands who is being smashed next. Because he needs to kite the axe on the opposite side. Okay, and as soon as the boss throws the spinning axe, the first player is running into the adjacent area. Like if you have a lot of movement speed, you can run even to the opposite side of the arena. Just be careful that you don't run into the area which will be smashed next. So after you smash to each pillar once, you are done. Now there's only one more thing which is important here. Like with many bosses in Throne of Liberty, the person with the highest aggro needs always to stay close to the boss. So every boss is doing something else. This boss will otherwise charge on you, which deals quite a bit of damage and will stun you. This charge attack is a wrath attack and it's really fast wrath attack. So you can block it, but if you don't know that it's coming, then it's really hard to react on it. So important here, after the boss is doing his last smash, you want your tank go directly onto the boss, because otherwise he will do his charge attack. So of course you can also block the wrath attack, but it's of course way easier if the tank just goes directly onto the boss. Okay, so let's come to the second major mechanic. He is doing 3 of those charges we just talked about. He will always do them first onto the furthest player again. So the easiest way is also if you're just defining a player who will also bait here the first dash. So for example, it could be the same who is also in the first mechanic always the furthest player. Because as mentioned, if you don't know that this dash is coming, it's like really hard to react on that. That's why it's always good to define one player who will be over to the furthest player, which usually always has then enough time to react on the dash. It's just important that no one stands here in between the boss and the furthest player, because otherwise everyone in this line will also get attacked by the dash. Okay, but then he's doing that 2 more times. Here of course people can prepare on the block, so it's not too hard. Okay, right after he did those 3 dashes, everyone needs to get close to the boss, because he will do a spinning attack who deals more damage if you're far away from the boss. So you will still get a little bit of damage if you are close to the boss, but the damage will be much lower. Okay, these are the 2 major mechanics. Now there are just 2 more small attacks he's doing. First of all, he's doing a small roundhouse kick, where just all melee players need to be a little bit careful, but it's really not too critical. And then he's also doing a small cone attack, but this is really nothing special. Okay, but that's it, everything you need to know for this boss. I think this is a super fun boss. Of course, with randoms in the beginning this can be really hard, but be nice to each other and help each other, and after a while everyone will understand it. Okay, so that's it. Thanks for watching. If you like the content and want to support me, don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya in the next one.